My name is AA, and at 34, I share my life with my husband, James. We both work for the company my father-in-law founded. Although he's retired, my father-in-law, a visionary entrepreneur, transformed a small construction company into a massive enterprise with an annual revenue of $250 billion. Despite his forceful approach, everyone admires his remarkable business acumen. James, chosen to succeed his father, grew up as a pampered child with a gentle nature. Unfortunately, this kindness doesn't always work well in the cutthroat world of business. In reality, James is incredibly indecisive, and I've started to question his suitability, not just as a husband but also as a CEO. James has even admitted that he might not be cut out for the role and could end up just being a figurehead. We've been married for 5 years, and lately, I've become frustrated with his lack of initiative. In contrast, I'm decisive. During my father-in-law's active years, he appreciated this quality in me and often delegated various tasks. Before marrying James, I worked at a bank, managing finances and always keeping the numbers in mind. Initially, I planned to become a full-time homemaker, but my father-in-law asked me to work for the company. As I started working, he involved me in board meetings, seeking my opinions on management matters. While the board members were initially skeptical, my consistent and relevant insights earned their respect. James, also a board member, rarely attended meetings. Strangely, this was deemed acceptable by everyone. One day, I returned home from a meeting to find James casually watching TV. Frustrated, I asked why he hadn't attended, emphasizing his key role. Without remorse, he replied, "Even if I attend, I don't really understand the discussions. Besides, the board members prefer you, so there's no problem, right?" I couldn't shake the feeling that James was growing increasingly irritated by my active participation in board meetings. Despite his occasional remarks, my father-in-law had been diligently teaching me the intricacies of running the business, seemingly grooming me as his successor. Surprisingly, I found myself enjoying the challenges of management and striving to meet my father-in-law's high expectations. About 2 years into attending meetings, my father-in-law retired completely. In his absence, the board members turned to me for consultation on major decisions, sidelining James. I had hoped this would motivate James to step up, but instead, he became even more disengaged. Despite showing up at the office in the mornings, he would vanish by noon, retreating home for the rest of the day. His indifference to the company's affairs contrasted sharply with my growing responsibilities. As my workload increased post-retirement, I found myself shouldering duties akin to a CEO. Our company's size and workforce meant that I had to remain committed to enhancing sales and profitability for the sake of our employees. Thankfully, our efforts bore fruit, and sales began to soar. While I immersed myself in the company's challenges, James seemed to lose interest. Our conversations dwindled, and tensions crept into our relationship. Amidst this strain, James casually mentioned meeting my sister, Megan, for lunch. Megan, 2 years my senior, had recently gone through a scandalous divorce due to infidelity, leading to a tumultuous confrontation at our parents' house. James, with his gentle upbringing, had intervened to defuse the situation, earning Megan's admiration. "Megan said something about you today," James remarked nonchalantly. "She couldn't stop praising you, even in the depths of anger. She was disarmed by your calm demeanor." Megan had started to see James differently, no longer viewing him as merely the indecisive, pampered son of the company's founder, but as a respectable business owner. I couldn't fathom it. My sister, drawn to wealth, now saw James as a catch. Little did she know, James was just a figurehead, lacking any real managerial duties. Megan's ex-husband had once boasted to me about his looks, intellect, and style, yet he betrayed her. It puzzled me, why would she cheat on such a remarkable man? 3 months after James mentioned lunch with Megan, I returned home to find him unusually serious. His demeanor hinted at impending news. My heart pounded as I waited for him to speak, and when he did, his words shook me to the core. "Actually, Megan is pregnant with my child, and I want a divorce." I was stunned and speechless. As if that revelation wasn't enough, he added, "Megan wants to discuss matters on her next day off." I was bewildered. "Do you intend to marry my sister?" I asked, trying to make sense of it all. With a troubled expression, James replied, "It's not that I want to marry her, but as she's carrying my baby, I suppose I have no choice." I sighed, accustomed to James's indecisiveness. "Well, if she's carrying your baby, I suppose it can't be helped. Let's discuss this when she comes over." It felt as though James and I couldn't make decisions together anymore. I took matters into my own hands and decided to meet with my sister directly. Despite having already made up my mind about the divorce, I felt the need to consult my father-in-law regarding the company's situation. As the daughter-in-law of the founder, I played a significant role in running the business, and a divorce would distance me from it. The following day, I visited my in-laws and relayed my husband's words to my father-in-law. My mother-in-law, initially thrilled about the prospect of a grandchild, fell silent under my father-in-law's stern gaze. It seemed she was more concerned about the grandchild than the company's management. After some contemplation, my father-in-law smiled and expressed his desire for me to continue overseeing the company, disregarding James's actions. His prioritization of the company's management over his son or grandchild showed his commitment even in retirement. With the job situation settled, it was time to address the future with my sister. On our day off, she arrived at my house with a triumphant smile. "Pity you couldn't conceive," she said, offering me consolation money and demanding that I leave the house immediately. Shocked by her audacity, I turned to James, who remained silent throughout the exchange despite being the root cause of the problem. His indifference appalled me. I calmly suggested involving a lawyer to resolve the issue of alimony and property division properly. Never did I imagine that my own sister would fall for a man like James. Her ironic remark prompted a stern glare from me, but she quickly regained her composure. In that moment, I realized she had begun to understand the importance of character over wealth. With restrained laughter, I said, "That's great. From now on, live happily with James." It struck me as amusing to hear my sister talk as if she had a profound understanding of my husband's inner self. It was clear that her perception of him had been centered around wealth. She had likely assumed he was the president of my father-in-law's company, yet it seemed she hadn't received any direct information from him. As our discussion concluded, my sister announced her intention to move in and had already arranged a moving company. Anticipating her quick temper, I had already secured a new apartment and hired a lawyer to prepare documents for the division of property and alimony claims. The next day, we began negotiations. Despite my husband's indifferent demeanor, my sister took charge of the conversation. "As I mentioned before, I'm willing to pay as much alimony as you want, so please decide at your convenience," she declared. My lawyer also decided to pursue alimony for her, considering her ongoing payments to her ex-husband. Though my lawyer cautioned that claiming alimony from her might be challenging, my sister's assurance opened the door for it. When the conversation shifted to property division, my sister confidently asserted, "This mansion is originally James's family's, so it shouldn't be part of the division, right?" My lawyer, maintaining a stoic demeanor, responded, "This building and the land belong to the company, so it's up to the company to decide." James, seemingly unaware, casually remarked, "Is that so? I thought this house was Dad's." My sister, taken aback, directed her confusion toward the lawyer. "Wait a minute, so does that mean I can't live in this house?" The lawyer clarified, "Since it's company property, you can continue to live here if the company allows it." Relieved, my sister responded, "Oh, you should have said that earlier. It'll be fine since James, the president, will be living here." The lawyer burst into laughter. "What are you talking about? Ava is the president, not James." To my sister's shock, she immediately turned to James, demanding an explanation. I stepped in, explaining that James was merely an advisor without executive rights, while I held the position of executive director and president. My father-in-law, the founder, had appointed me to these roles based on my performance and the board's approval. James, despite his father's arrangements, received an executive salary as an advisor, despite lacking any real duties. His salary was modest compared to a regular employee, and I managed all of our living expenses, including the rent for our company-owned home, which my responsible father-in-law always charged. The lawyer asked, "Can we continue to rent this house to James?" My sister reacted strongly. "What do you mean by rent? Are you suggesting that I take rent from James? Isn't it the company's property? Just make it free." The lawyer, amused, presented the rent amount, prompting shock from both my sister and James, who seemed to be learning about it for the first time. The realization of how much they would need to pay for such a large house left them concerned about their financial situation. Over the 5 years of their marriage, they had depleted their savings, and splitting the remaining assets was the only option. After the lawyer left, my sister, now aware that the mansion she had hoped for was rented, felt utterly deflated. James, with his usual grin, agreed when I suggested returning to his parents' house. As I contemplated this decision, I couldn't help but find it amusing how much consideration I was giving to a man who was about to be my ex-husband. Despite my concerns about his unreliability in raising a child, I decided to leave it as none of my business. Turning to my sister, who had seemingly forgotten about her own alimony obligations, I asked, "Are you okay with the alimony payment, sis? You seemed pretty confident, but you're also paying your ex-husband, right?" She was stunned, seemingly oblivious to our earlier discussion. Her face snapped back to reality. "Alimony? I have to pay it too." She had said she'd give plenty of alimony, but now her low salary was an issue. James and my sister exchanged surprised glances, and I couldn't help but find our situation pathetic. While I had already obtained signatures for the divorce papers and alimony request documents, their reaction was somewhat amusing. My ex-husband, now married to my sister, had returned to his parents' home, as I had warned. However, constant quarrels broke out between my sister and my in-laws, primarily stemming from the lie about her being pregnant with my ex-husband's child. His mother, hoping for an heir, was furious. My father-in-law, who had disapproved of my sister from the start, fronted the alimony for James but hadn't even spoken to her. He refused to pay her alimony, stating he had no reason to be called dad. Frustrated and unable to secure what she had hoped for, my sister left my ex-husband's family home without a word. It seemed she had remarried him solely to bear the burden of alimony, which proved to be a foolish decision. Though my ex-husband considered reuniting with me, his father scolded him, deeming him unfit to have a family. Personally, I had no intention of getting back with him after his betrayal with my sister. Disgusted by his indifferent attitude, I dismissed him from his executive position, and he now works as a temporary employee. I continued as CEO, focusing on the company as the core aspect of my life. After the breakup, I stopped believing in the possibility of remarriage, choosing instead to remain connected with my father-in-law for advice when needed. For now, my dedication lies in the success of the company, considering it a commitment akin to marriage, for the sake of my employees.